So tonight, we're going to talk about working with off-market sellers. Whether you are a fix and flip investor or a wholesaler or a buy and hold investor, you're not going to be any of those without property acquisition. So as long as you have to have property acquisition as part of your plan, you might as well go get properties at the absolute lowest prices that you can. And the way to do that is by working directly with the seller. So think about that the same way nutritionists will tell you that the foods that you eat that are closest to the ground are better for you. So fruits and vegetables are better than Doritos and Oreo cookies. At least that's what the nutritionists say. So it's the same way here with off-market properties. Hold on, give me just a second. I'm a little frustrated. I had the meeting up and I wanted to have it up so that I could see everybody's if they want to raise their hand and ask questions and all that stuff. So give me just a second.
I can monitor the questions, Dan, no worries. So people can send questions via the chat, and then at the end, we're gonna save some time for Q&A. Hey, Dan, we don't hear you, so can you unmute yourself? Okay, friends, I think Dan is having some technical difficulties, so please hold on the line. He's connecting.
Is that better?
Much better. So
now you can hear me. Where did you lose me? Where did you lose me? So I'll start over.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I mean, did you hear anything I said? Or are we starting from the beginning?
Quickly from the beginning then.
Okay, so working with off-market sellers is where you're going to find the cheapest prices, the best deals, the deepest discounts, and all that good stuff. So, when we talk about wholesaling, that's really just an exit strategy, right? The whole idea is that we're in the property acquisition business. Wholesaling is simply one of the exits. So we're going to either wholesale it, we're going to take it down and wholesale it, we are going to take it down and do a fix and flip, or we're going to take it down and put it into a rental portfolio. So none of those things can happen without property acquisition. So as long as we have to acquire properties, we might as well get them off market, because you'll never ever get the deals and the spreads from the MLS or an auction that you'll get off market. We've had probably 3 or 4 deals now over time that I've been involved in off market, that if I wasn't part of those deals myself and someone tried to tell me how much money they made on a particular deal, I would have to think they're lying, or it's illegal, or it can't possibly be true, because the numbers were so big. It's at the end of the day, though, it's not, the right mindset is not how cheap can I get this house and how much money I can make. The whole goal here is that we're in the people helping business. So attorneys, they solve people's legal problems and they get paid handsomely for it. Doctors, they serve people's medical problems and they get paid handsomely for that. So if you can be in a business where you're solving people's problems, you can get paid handsomely. But as the old saying goes, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's where the whole rapport building and relational side of off-market properties comes into play. Because when you're dealing with off-market properties, it really has very little to do with the house, and it has everything to do with people. So the idea is to kind of get into character, get into mode of a role that you're going to play when you're speaking to sellers on the phone or when you're meeting with them in person. Many of you, and I'm probably going to tell you a bunch of things that some of you already know. And if it's new information, then that's awesome. But there's a technique that you should practice doing when you're with people called mirroring. And so when I'm with a seller that talks kind of soft and kind of slow, then that's the way that I talk back to them, because that's how they relate to me, because people tend to like people like themselves. So the more I can transform myself into being like them, that will help me. So some of the stuff we're going to talk about, you have to realize that it's not any one thing. But the whole idea is we're trying to stack a deck here. And if you can put enough logs on the fire, so to speak, it's going to give you the best shot at all this. It starts with the first phone call. Typically, if somebody's called and they've left a message, or if you're calling them back kind of thing, I do something that's a little counterintuitive to what many of you might have been taught in other arenas. Typically, they would say the polite thing to do is to clear the person's time. You're calling them, in the world of cell phones, you don't know if they're walking through the grocery store, sitting on the couch, they have a friend over and they're sitting on the porch. So the polite thing to do is to say, hey, did I catch you at a good time? In dealing with sellers, I do just the opposite. I say, did I catch you at a bad time? And the reason I do that, it's a little kind of a psychological hack, but, and it's not always a true tell, but what I'm looking for is for a seller to say, oh, no, now it's fine. This is a good time. We can talk right now. Because if somebody says to me, oh yeah, I'm kind of busy. Hey, can you give me a call back tomorrow? Now that's not 100% guarantee that there's no deal there, but it's already stacking the deck that a deal is going to be unlikely, because people that have a problem want to talk to somebody immediately that thinks they can solve their problem. So think about, if you had a bad water leak pipe or something in your house, and a plumber, you left 3 voicemails for plumbers, and when one finally called you back and said, "Did I catch you at a bad time?" The answer would be absolutely not. I'm not talking or doing anything other than talking to you because you're the most important person in my world right now. And that's the kind of response that we're looking from when I talk to sellers. Usually we get them to, I like to get them talking about the house a little bit. And I mostly do that because people, the more they talk, the more comfortable they feel. When you go to a cocktail party or you're out somewhere and you don't know people too well, it used to be kind of funny when I'd go to my wife's Christmas parties years gone by. I'd meet the people she worked with, and I would ask them questions about them. Wow, how do you know my wife? How long have you worked here? What is it you do with the company? Wow, that's interesting. How did you get started doing that? Well, so you must have went to college. Oh, where did you go to college? And I asked them a gazillion questions, and I listened intently. And then a couple of days later, my wife comes home and goes, "Oh, so-and-so, oh, they met you at the party. They thought you were so great." I go, "How can they possibly think I'm great? They don't know anything about me. I didn't tell them anything." But what I did is I took an interest in them. And that is important when you're dealing with sellers because, instinctively they're going to have a problem. And it's the person that they feel comfortable peeling back that onion and being vulnerable that is going to allow you to really understand what their circumstances are and how it is that you might be able to help them. Typically, I set the tone with sellers that people that sell me houses are typically willing to exchange some equity for speed and convenience. Essentially, we're running a pawn shop. And that's a description that I think everybody can relate to. And anybody that thinks about bringing an item to a pawn shop, they know they're not going to get what it's worth, but they know they're going to get cash. They're going to get it today, and they don't have to deal with whatever this item is any longer. And that's kind of where we're at with sellers. So the whole thing with sellers is that, I think you have to go in realizing that, like playing a slot machine or scratching lottery tickets, that it's going to be mostly losers. It's going to be mostly people that don't have a need, don't have an urgency, are fishing for an offer, want to sell for retail, or want to sell you at a price that's retail minus commission, like that's going to be a good deal. And that's okay. So we talk to those people too, but also be reminded that time is your most valuable resource. So that's one of the things in life that's an equalizer. There's a lot of things that separate people from the jobs they have, to the educations they do or don't have, to the kind of car and where they live. And these are all separators. But whether you're changing the sheets at a Holiday Inn, or you're a CPA accountant, or you're the CEO of the Ford Motor Company, or love them or hate them, you're the president of the United States, no matter how much money and power you yield, nobody gets more than 24 hours in the day. So the real question is, how am I spending my time? Who am I spending it with? And is what I'm doing right now going to get me any closer to where I'm trying to go in my life and in my business? So it's not that we want to be rude and just hang up on people, but usually I tell them pretty quickly that I don't think we're going to be a good match. And, they probably want to list their property. While we're going here, I'm going to grab some questions as we go, if that's okay with everybody. I have one here. Someone's asking, with the new wholesale laws, how do you explain that you're trying to buy their house cash wholesale, but also that you're a realtor? So as a realtor, you're of course going to have to disclose that you are in fact a realtor. I think everyone probably maybe has a little different way or a different time in throwing that out there. But I think the easy thing to do is merely to say, hey, just so you know, I am licensed, but I'm not here meeting with you in an effort to represent you or in an effort to list your property. I'm simply here on my own accord looking to buy an investment property for myself. And, once that's on the table, I don't think, there's really anything else that needs to be said. Your off-market contract, ours says on it that the buyer is a licensed realtor, just so, it's visible on the contract as well. So the whole purpose of the phone call is to create a little rapport, try to uncover some need. Over the course of the conversation, there's really only two questions that personally I ask that I'm listening for the right answer. And one is, why are you, there's a lot of ways to phrase it, but essentially the question is, what, why are you thinking about selling your house at this time? And the follow-up to that question is, hey, how soon are you looking to get this done? Because if they don't have any kind of pressing situation, and if they don't have any particular timeline, there isn't any reason that they're going to sell a property at the discounted price we need to buy it for in order to have it be a viable investment property, right? Sometimes the way I pull that second question out of them is I might ask it in a way of, hey, listen, are you thinking about, making sure this house is sold in the next 30 to 60 days or next 3 to 6 months, or maybe anytime, in the coming year? And of course, the answer we're looking for is 30 to 60 days, because the sooner they want to do it, the more urgency there is, the more likely that we're going to be able to find our way to a deal. Be aware that sometimes people aren't going to, throw up every problem they're having on the phone because they don't know you yet and they don't trust you yet. And so it's likely that they're, gonna give you an indication that there's, some problems, but they probably aren't going to tell you everything. So particularly if you're new, and particularly if you haven't been on a lot of seller calls, I would say try to go on every seller meeting that you can, because, you're basically just trying to get some experience and talking to people, looking at the house, asking them questions, building rapport. So there's no right way and wrong way to do some of these things. Tonight, I'm just merely sharing with you the way I go about things and the way, I go about working with sellers. And the way that I've been doing it has served me pretty well. Done a lot of deals, a lot of big deals. And, but that said, I'm always open and I'm always listening for new ways to improve what I'm doing. So if any of you are baseball fans, you might remember when they spoke about Greg Maddox, Cubs pitcher, then Brewers pitcher, then back to the Cubs. They used to always say that he was a student of the game. So even on days he wasn't pitching, he's watching the hitters. He's watching the pitches being thrown to him, and he's studying these batters because he knows at some point he's going to be facing them in the future. So if you're going to be in any business, really, you want to be a student of the game, because you always want to be finding ways to improve, new ways to word things, because sometimes it's one little thing that can make that difference. Where was I going with that? So when we talk to sellers on the phone, another way to kind of test their motivation is, usually the old school thought is you give people an alternative of choice, because the choice between something and something is better than something and nothing. But for the purposes of working with sellers, I ask it for a different reason. So if I say, you know, hey, it's like as we get into the fall here, it starts getting dark early. So if I'm talking to somebody late afternoon or in the evening, I might say, hey, listen, I normally like to look at properties during the day. And by the time I'd get over there today, it's probably going to be about dark. So it might be better if I came over tomorrow. What time would be better for you tomorrow? 9 a.m. or 11, 1 or 3, 11 or 2, an early time and a late time. Again, there isn't any wrong answer, but what I'm looking for is the first available choice. So if I say what would be better in the morning, 9 or would the afternoon around 3 work better for you? I'm hoping they say 9. Again, does that mean there's a deal? Of course not. But what it does mean is that they want me to come as soon as I'm available to come. And that usually is one more log on the fire that we're going in the right direction. Does that make sense? Normally when you go see the house, you're expounding on the rapport that you started to build on the phone. When I go to people's houses, I wear a blue shirt. Again, does that matter? I don't know. But studies have shown, if you look at color charts, maybe you haven't thought about it, but did it ever dawn on you that basically every fast food, every hot dog stand in the city, the colors are always yellow and red? There's a reason for that, because that triggers hunger. So when you look at what different colors represent, blue is the color of trust. So that's why Chase, Allstate, investment firms like to use blue, because it's very calming. It's the trust, they call it. So I wear a blue shirt. I don't know that it matters, but I don't, like I said before, I don't know that any one thing matters, but if I can put enough of those little things all together at the end, maybe it does matter. When I get to people's house, I typically stand back a good 4 feet from the front door, because I'm trying to think for a second that, holy cow, like they might have, responded to a marketing piece. They talked to somebody on the phone, and now someone's coming to see them. And if they're an older person and if they live alone, that can be a little intimidating. So I like to stand back from the door far enough so that after I ring it, they can look out, any of the windows and see me out front. And hopefully they see that I seem non-threatening visually anyways. Not that that's always a tell, but you want to be approachable. You want to dress kind of conservatively. I don't wear suits, but I typically wear a collared shirt or a golf shirt of some sort. And because typically it seems like, as a rule, we deal with older people. You have to kind of think about what older people like. So older people aren't normally big fans of gauges and piercings and tattoos. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those things, but older people, they don't identify with that. And so the whole idea here is we're trying to identify, and we're trying to be as like them as possible. Hold on, someone had a question here. What do I mean by seller calls / events? Try to rephrase that. I'm not sure I understand that question. Another question was, if you're trying to wholesale, is it better to be upfront with your intentions, or do the me and my partner's cash buyer are buying the property? That's a great question. And that's one that a lot of wholesalers, in my opinion, get wrong, because they set the wrong expectation. I'm all about setting the right expectation. And I tell them right from the beginning that, listen, you have to understand that I'm not going to live here. And because I'm not going to live here, I'm not going to get emotionally attached to this property. This is a business transaction. And it's really, if the numbers work, the numbers work. And if they don't, they don't, and no hard feelings either way. But, as with any investment, the goal, God willing, is to make a profit. And I'm going to make that profit one of three ways. I'm either going to purchase this home and make an additional investment into it with the thoughts of reselling it later, because I think talking about making an additional investment sounds better than telling them that you're going to fix and flip it. Some of the industry jargon and some of the language we use with other investors, that doesn't necessarily need to be the same language that you use when you're talking to sellers, right? Even though they've watched Property Brothers and all the shows, it's just a softer way of putting it. I'll typically also say that, I might purchase it, make an investment to a lesser degree with the thoughts of renting it. And sometimes, frankly, you don't know me that well, but I don't have an unlimited source. And sometimes, just like you told me, sometimes more calls come in and more good properties become available than I can possibly absorb. But we come to an agreement on a price, and I know you're counting on getting that price and getting this closed in the next X amount of time. So I just have to ask you right up front, as long as you get the $82,000 we agreed on, does it matter to you if it's my 82,000 or somebody else's? And I've never yet had anybody tell me that, oh no, it has to be yours, because they don't really care about that. They just want the money. And I tell them, listen, I go, and the reason I ask you that is because, I don't want there to be any surprises later. And just like, school bus drivers know the school bus drivers, and, accountants know accountants. Well, as a real estate investor, it might be likely that I know other real estate investors. And, I have friends and people that I know that are looking for these kinds of opportunities. And rather than have to call you and tell you, oh, I found a better house, I'm not buying yours, I want to make sure that you get the 82,000. I might, pass it off to somebody I know. Is that okay with you? Again, there's a lot of questions, I think, that people sometimes are afraid to bring up and afraid to ask. I forgot who said it, but somebody I know that talked about how they worry about everything. I go, why do you worry about everything? It's such negative energy. And they said, I don't know. I find worrying to be good luck. It seems like 95% of the things I worry about never actually happen, right? So same thing goes with, normally I'll ask them right off the bat on the phone before I even go over there. Hey, it sounds like a nice property. Have you considered, calling a realtor and having them list it? And some people would say, oh my God, why would you possibly put that idea in their head? Well, this may come as a surprise to you. That's not putting a new idea in their head. I think almost anybody walking around knows about realtors and know that they list and sell houses. So the reason I'm asking them that is because I'm waiting for them to tell me why they don't want to do that. Because if they wanted to do that, they already would have. So the fact that they're dealing with me means they don't want to do that. So now I want to find out why. And sometimes it's for privacy reasons. They don't want all the nosy neighbors, to know what's going on. Oftentimes, if we buy a house and we're over there later, one of the neighbors will come by and go, I didn't even know the house was for sale. And that's by design. Some people don't like all the showings and they don't want to have to clean it out and paint a wall and replace carpeting and do all the things that they think that they need to do. And in some cases, they've already talked to a realtor, and a realtor told them, well, in order to sell the house, you need to do all these things. And because we're dealing with people that are primarily in distress, they often don't have the wherewithal to take on any house projects. They merely want to sell the house as is. And that's our value proposition. We can't pay full price, but we can buy it as is. You can leave all the junk here if you want to. we'll close quickly, and it'll be a cash deal. So that's kind of the value proposition that we offer as a wholesaler. The other reason it's important to cover off on that whole assignment thing, because depending on how you close, and my business partner Joe Youre and I own Investor Title Services, and we work with wholesalers, and we have an attorney that's a part of the team that facilitates these deals. But that's a whole nother complex conversation, because if the seller is going to use an attorney of their choice on an off-market deal, they're already going to hate your contract for two reasons. One, because on wholesale deals, the buyer always pays closing costs. And why is that? That's because we want to control the closing. And if the seller's attorney is controlling it, then that could be a problem. So the fact that attorneys don't like any contracts that they didn't write, they'll either A, want to rewrite it all and add a bunch of stuff to it, or B, they're going to want to put it on the Board of Realtors 7.0 contract. And not that that's the end of the world. I've let them do it a couple times, but you always have to be very careful about what things are in there and not in there, so that as a wholesaler, you're covered. The reason we use, that 2-page flimsy, it's barely a bar napkin kind of contract, is because we want people to sign it in the moment. Think about blowing up a balloon, and you're blowing it up, and you get it to that point where one more blow and it's most likely going to pop. That's the call to action. I think we've probably all been there in our personal life, whether it's buying a car that's maybe a little more expensive than you were planning on, and you're having that moment where you're not sure whether or not you should do it. The whole idea is we want to help people cross that bridge right then and there, because if you leave without a signed contract, then you got to start blowing the balloon up all over again. And when a seller wants to think about it, or can I bring this contract and have my attorney review it, with the little 2-page contract I have, I usually kind of giggle and I go, really? I mean, what exactly would you like your attorney to review? I mean, this is 2 pages. It's written in simple English that a 3rd grader could read it to you, and a 5th grader could tell you what it says. So what I think I hear you saying to me non-verbally is that you're not happy about the $82,000 that I thought we already agreed to. And that usually is the trigger. Of course it is. And they say, well, I was just hoping to get a little more. And I say, yeah, I was hoping to be handsome. And they kind of laugh about that. And, it kind of breaks the tension and sometimes puts it over the top. A lot of times they say, listen, it's my goal to give you as much as I can, up to the point where it puts me at a financial risk by doing so. And, this is about as high as I can go. Or sometimes I say, well, I'll tell you what. I'm pretty much at the limit, but what if I put another 500 on top? That way, that'll cover the cost of an attorney. So at that point, you won't have any expenses, because I'll have covered the attorney and I'm covering all the closing costs. So how would that be? When it comes to the contract, I don't ever leave a contract with a seller. I don't, the old saying in life is half a life is showing up. So I realize there's people virtual wholesaling. And if you're on Facebook, you'd think there's a lot of people doing a lot of things. I think there's a lot of people, sitting in their boxers and not doing any business and trying to make it look like they have something going on. Not to say that people aren't virtual wholesaling, Of course, some of them are, but showing up is half of the game in life, in anything. So, don't take the easy way and email a contract and hope they sign it and send it back. Go there in person and have them sign it, or have them sign it, when you go to see the house. Personally, I'm always planning to leave a house with a signed contract. It's the whole reason I'm going over there. I'm not going over there to look at houses. After you've looked at a lot of houses, what's there to look at? There's a couple bedrooms, a kitchen, and sometimes a basement. It's really not that interesting. So the whole exercise has nothing to do with the house. It's getting the contract signed at the right price, of course. So the reason you don't want to leave a contract with somebody, because frankly, all it's going to do is get used against you, because they're going to have somebody else come over and they're going to take him down the road and they're going to come up with an offer and they're going to pull out your contract out of some magic folder that they pull out from under the cushion, and they go, oh, well, this guy says he'll give me this much, or this, I had some woman over here, she said she'd give me this much. And typically what happens is the person that's there in the moment, if the numbers make sense, can add $1,000 to that and leave with a contract. Ask me how I know that. I've gotten plenty of contracts that way. So don't leave a weapon to be used against yourself with a seller. Let's see, any other questions? Can I share the contract I used? It's 2 pages. Yes. My email address is Dan Clarton, Clarton, and I would be happy to email you a copy of the contract. The only thing that I would ask is that before you use it, call me so I can walk you through it. And again, it's 2 pages and a 3rd grader could read it, but there's a couple psychological hacks built in to it that you will want to make sure to be aware of. So, it's important that I explain that to you so you get the best use out of it. Also, if you're not, for some reason, it ended at Gmail, I'm sorry, Dan Clarton at Gmail. And the contract that I use is in the resources inside ChicagoDealVault. So if you have ChicagoDealVault already, it's already there. And if you don't, I'm not sure why not, but you'll want to, and it'll be there for you as well. I'm kind of jumping around in no particular order because this isn't a canned, speech that I go around and give 3 times a week. So I'm just kind of randomly thinking of things that I think are going to matter and provide you the most value to you while we're on the phone today. Some of those things are getting in the right mindset. I hope it's okay that I'm just going to be vulnerable and transparent with some of the stuff that I do. Because frankly, some of it is, kind of silly and probably a little embarrassing to admit, but I want to give you everything that I got for your benefit. So typically when I'm about to go see a house, I'll park a few houses down. I'll throw it in park. I'll tilt the visor down and open the mirror so I can see myself, or I'll just tilt over the, the rear view mirror. And I start speaking words of affirmation to myself. And it sounds ridiculous, but, I'm like, Dan, you're a great salesman. This is going to be a great meeting. They're going to love you. This, from the minute you walk in, you're going to bond with these people. They're going to like you. They're going to trust you. And I just start saying all the things that I want to have happen. And after you do that for a very short period of time, you kind of start laughing because it's ridiculous. But what that does is it just kind of changes my whole demeanor. And it kind of just puts a different bounce in my step as I go in the front door. And it's kind of my way of, quote, going into character, if you will. What do I put on my mailings that advise the owner that you are a licensed broker? I'm not an attorney, so you'd have to ask your attorney about that. But um, I don't know for sure that you have to identify that on a mailing. Um, Joe and I held a meeting at the Westin Rosemont shortly after the law was passed about wholesaling and being licensed. And we held a recorded phone call with the sponsoring senator on the bill and a couple other legal people from the Illinois Association of Realtors, etc. And we asked them every tough question that we could come up with that we thought not only do we want to know, but other investors would want to know. And one of the things they talked about was making the phone ring is not a licensed activity. Now, when you're going to talk to somebody, when you actually start talking about the property and about pricing and about condition, that's at the point you got to be disclosing that you're a licensed broker. Again, it works a little bit different for sellers than buyers. We're going to close October 1st, but I have 5 single family homes in Elgin that are under contract that we're buying from the same owner. I had 2 trips through 5 houses, one by myself, another one with Joe, multiple conversations with the seller. And it wasn't until we sat down and did the contracts. And at the very end, she goes, "Oh, by the way, I think I have to tell you that I'm licensed." Well, of course, for our purposes and because we're buying, that doesn't really matter to us. We're not going to be a victim in that kind of a situation, but neglecting to tell a seller that, that can get you in hot water. So you always want to, when in doubt, disclose. Here's another question from Gail. Do you offer sellers moving costs, clean out services, etc., in addition to the purchase price? Where do you find new information on the wholesale law? You know what? I'm not really sure where that information is on the law. I know there's some language on it. We have it in the email. Again, if you want to email me, I will dig up what we sent on the backside to everyone that came to the meeting in Rosemont. I think there's a link there that takes you to the actual provision and what the new law is and all that stuff. In terms of offering moving costs and all that, we don't. Not saying you can't, but again, that just complicates the simple. In other words, well, who's going to clean out? They're going to call a company and you're going to pay for it? I don't think so. You're going to send your crew over there? I don't know. Do you have a crew? And particularly if you're going to wholesale it, your buyer has to, that's the whole point of assignment. So whatever you've agreed to with the seller, your end buyer is going to have to agree to when they take over the contract. And I'm not sure how many buyers, myself included, that want to be saddled with paying and doing more than I think I want to for the price of the house. So normally the whole idea is that as part of this offer that's lower than you were hoping for, certainly lower than you expected, is that all that kind of stuff is thrown in. It kind of goes the other way. Have you ever been somewhere and they, prime example, last weekend I was in Los Angeles and we went over to Catalina Island, and it's a hour-long boat ride. They have the regular fare and then they have the Commodore Club. Well, the Commodore Clubs is like $25 more per person each way. And when you are in the Commodore Club, you get free snacks and a free drink. Well, let's face it, that's not a free drink and it's not a free snack because you already paid for it, right? So it's the same kind of thing. So part of that low price is the fact that you're going to do all those things. You're not really going to, clean out services don't really need to be offered because, again, the value proposition that we're offering is that we're going to be able to take, the burden off of them. So this is particularly important when it comes to inherited and probate houses. The best example I can give of that, my parents are still alive and I haven't had to deal with it personally, but I've been around it enough in real estate that I already know how it works. I want you to think about it like this. If anybody's had a dog or a cat or something that, you consider part of the family and you love, and the way it seems to work is we typically outlast our pets. So that means at some point their health starts failing and a decision has to be made about putting them down, doesn't it? You realize that a 50-cent shotgun shell and a walk in the woods can put your yellow lab out of misery, but you're not going to do that, and neither am I. There's no way I'm putting a bullet in my dog's head. That's crazy. So what do we do instead? We take it to the vet, and the vet takes care of it, and we pay $200 or $300 again for something we could have done for 50 cents. But the whole idea is we don't want to have to be the one to do it. We don't want to, it's too painful. It's all that stuff. Well, that's the same way it works when people are dealing with, inherited and probate properties. Usually the kids are involved. Usually the kids are greedy. They want the money as soon as possible. Usually there's 2 or 3 sisters and brothers, and the one with no money is always the one that has the bright idea to, hey, let's fix it all up and sell it for a high price. And then one of the brothers is like, well, how much money do you have to help with that? And the answer is, well, none. Well, if I'm putting all the money in, then we're not splitting it equally. And that's where the fight starts. So in the end, it's like, yeah, forget that. We're just going to sell it as is, get as much money as we can, and we split it up and we're done. Well, that's fine, except when they go over to the house to start figuring out what they're going to do, a lot of times if parents have been there, even if they're not hoarders, there's furniture and there's dishes and there's all that stuff. And we all know most of it has no value. And the kids don't need it. They don't want it, but they can't bear the thought of having a dumpster dropped off and carrying a lifetime collection of their parents' things and throwing it away. It's too painful. So again, the service that we're providing is, hey, I'll tell you what, why don't you go through the house and by all means, anything that has, any perceived monetary value or sentimental value for sure, by all means, take all that stuff, take it home, do what you're going to do with it. And all the rest of the stuff, like all the things in your mom's spice cabinet, which they expired in 1993. You don't have to worry about that stuff. We'll take care of it. And that's really, really a relief to people. And they really appreciate that. Typically I say, listen, if we can find a price that we're both miserably happy about and you never walk through this house again, that would be okay. We'll take it just the way it sits. And again, that's what makes our value proposition different than if they were going to go ahead and list it. Because if you list it on the MLS and all that, and you use a 7.0 contract that's 14 pages long, one of the provisions in there is the property has to be empty and broom swept at closing. And that's a lot of work. We just had a property in Mundelein, a little 3-acre horse property that we double closed, which rhymes with big profit. And the 3 kids were furious that the owner was going to just sell it outright on a cash deal and not list it. And the seller identified that with our acquisition person and said, hey, listen, my kids are furious that I'm going to do this, but you know what? You see how much stuff is here? And this is a ton of work. packing stuff up, getting rid of stuff, having an estate sale, doing all that stuff. And you know what the funny thing is? Despite how angry my kids are about what I'm doing, not one of them has offered to do anything to help me, right? So that's kind of the thing, right? So that's a service that is valued. Couple more questions. My email address is my name, which is Dan Clarton, Clarton. It's probably on your screen, and at gmail.com. What contract do I use between me and the investor just so they take over your assignment? So in our business, we have a pretty simple one-page assignment agreement. And, you know, that's more of a disposition question. What time is it? Oh my gosh, it's 7 o'clock already. I could talk for another 2 hours about this stuff. But the quick answer is we have a simple one-page assignment contract or agreement that we use. And basically we don't put on our assignment fee. It says how much they're going to pay for the property, which includes the assignment fee, because I don't want to, I'm not negotiating on my fee. I mean, we've had deals. Well, if you're going to make over about 10,000, then you're going to want to do a double close. And the reason you do that is because it's insulating the seller and the buyer from the profit you're going to make. You know, everybody knows that you're going to make a profit, but if they think it's too much, then all of a sudden it's a problem. So the best way to do is keep that invisible. And even on the smaller ones, if it's going to be $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 assignment fee, it goes back to that attorney conversation. If they don't use our attorney and they use theirs, a well-intentioned attorney goes through that master statement and goes, oh, and here's this, and here's this, and here's taxes, and oh, yeah, remember that nice guy that bought the house? Yeah, he just made $8,000 because he sold it to this person. And at some point, $8,000 on a $180,000 house doesn't rock the boat too much. But if you're buying a property for $32,000 and you sold it for $40,000, and the seller had back taxes and a mortgage, and they're walking out of the closing with $5,000, and you're walking out with $8,000, and they had a house and you didn't, that could ruffle people's feathers. So the whole idea is disclosing that your goal is to make a profit, so that when that gets pointed out to them, and if it does, they go, $8,000. Well, I mean, he did tell me that he was looking to make a profit. I didn't think it was going to be that much of a profit, but just the same. Okay, well, I got the 82,000 he said I would, so I have to be happy or whatever. I've heard a few stories where not disclosing that up front, a seller could blow the deal up right there at the closing table and go, what? This guy made $27,000 selling my house to somebody else? That means my house is worth at least $25,000 more. And they'll just blow up the deal right there. So you don't want that to happen. We're running out of time on Hugo's time frame. We're not running out of time on mine. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, I've been jumping all over the place, and I apologize that it didn't have a real good cadence and it wasn't in any particular order, but there was just so much I wanted to throw out at you. Let me talk about one other thing while you're thinking about any questions you want to ask. I heard this analogy from someone that does public speaking. And what he said was that I love being on stage. I love, giving my talk to groups of people and all that kind of stuff. He goes, but you realize that's really only about 10% of what I do. 90% of what I do is calling companies, trying to arrange, speaking engagements, sitting on the internet, booking flights, booking hotel rooms, riding in cabs to get to the airport, standing in security lines, sitting on an airplane for 4 hours, getting to a hotel, sitting around all night waiting for tomorrow morning, right? He goes, that's 90% of what I do. But I do all that 90% so I can do this for 10% because this is what I'm excited to do. Well, I want you to think about that in the same way when you go on a seller appointment. I mean, all the money that you've spent on direct mail, on ringless voicemail, on texting, on cold calling, on postcards, letters, bandit signs, bus, banners, whatever you're doing and spending money on to get that phone to ring. Think about all that money you spent. Now think about all the time you've spent taking all those seller phone calls, and you've talked to 50 people to find 3 that might turn into a deal. And you've spent time talking to them. You've spent time researching the property, trying to figure out, what it can sell for as an ARV, trying to figure out what kind of offer you're going to have to make. And the 10% is when you're actually in front of people. So personally, I can't think of any reason to rush that part of what we do. That's where the money's made. And I tell people right when I get there, I say, hey, thanks for inviting me over to buy your house today. I set the expectation, I'm here to buy your house. I'm not here to look at houses. I'm here to buy houses. And, so that's why it's important. And, I realize I'm a talker, and I realize it doesn't have to be this long, but if I think about all the, seller appointments that I go on, I would say my average is about 2 hours with a seller. 2 hours. Now that said, if I go on 10 appointments, I'm probably leaving with 7 contracts. So my conversion rate is way above normal, way above, what I think the industry standards are. But because I'm a career salesman, and because I work all the techniques, and some things you should research is handshakes. Google handshakes and see all the different kinds of handshakes, and that's a window into their personality. And based on what kind of personality people have, and you'll gain that just by talking to them as well, it tells you how you're going to have to deal with that person. So you're not going to deal with everybody the same. So, when you meet some A-type personality that's go, 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 I'm in a big hurry, I don't have time for this, then you have to act the same way. Because if you don't act like they act, then they're not going to respect you. So there's all those little subtleties. And when I get someone that gives me the death grip and is all about himself and all full of himself and, trying to call the shots and, he's telling me how it's going to be, I let him. But on a house that I think I need to buy for 80, I don't start at 75. I start at 30, like a ridiculously low number, because I know his ego requires him to beat me up so he can win. So if I start at 30 and I go all the way up to 80, where I wanted to be anyways, he feels like he won. And he's pounding his chest. And then he tells all his buddies, yeah, this guy came over to buy my house. He tried to offer me $30,000. I worked that guy over for an hour. And by the time he left, he paid 80 for it. Great. Let him win. That's the same 80, I was looking to make. All right. So there's a friend of mine that happened to jump on the call here, and he had a seller that he spoke to long ago. I think I spoke to the seller with him at one point, and the seller has listed the property, and it's been on the market for a while, and has recently called Frank back, inquiring if he was still interested in selling the property. Frank, is that the scenario that we're talking about here, or did I miss something? You can text me or put it on the group chat. So would it be a good exercise if I went ahead and called that seller and we had a little conversation? Would anybody like to listen to that?
Let's do it then. That is going to be very powerful.
You get a few yeses. All right. Yeah, let's have some fun. Completely unscripted, completely unplanned. We're going to call this person as a follow-up. Hold on here. 847. So when we do these kind of things, it's out of respect that this probably doesn't even need to be said, but because this is not, quote, my seller, it's somebody else's. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. If addresses happen to get said and this and that people aren't driving over them or knocking on the door, right? I mean, let's just be respectful. Is that okay? I would think so. All right. Let's see here. Let's make a call. Hold on. Let me pull up. So at the risk of. All right. So this property was listed. Didn't pop up there. Wait, hold on, bear with me. I'll make sure I get the right address here. So it looks like maybe the listing expired. Let's see. Listing was removed today. Now, this person dropped the price 25,000. So between the time they started, which was May. So expired listings, that's a good source of potential sellers because these are all the people that were on Fantasy Island with some price that a realtor told them they could get. And now they didn't get it. And there's going to be plenty of realtors that are going to be chasing all these people down for the sake of listing it with them, like somehow listing it with them at a similar price is going to get a different result. So theoretically, they should be anxious to speak to you because you say you're not looking to list it, you're looking to buy it. So let's make a phone call here and see if we get lucky. Can you guys hear that okay? Somebody give me a yes. Hello, is this Miss Patel?
Yes.
Hi, this is Dan. Did I happen to catch you at a bad time?
No, not really. I'm driving. So what's up?
Well, I wanted to call because you called my friend Frank. I think you and I talked a while ago. You have a property
Yeah.
that you're looking to
Yeah.
sell?
Yes. So I wanted to know your offer, like how much you would offer. I just wanted to know.
Well, I mean, the first thing you should know is that my offer is going to be way lower than you're expecting, and I mean, a lot lower than you're hoping for. Uh,
Oh, okay.
I mean, I see that you had it listed, and I see that you removed the listing, and I see that you've kind of reduced the price already. Just out of curiosity, it looks like a
Yeah.
really nice place. Why do you think it didn't sell?
Oh, because I moved to Arizona.
Because why?
I moved to Arizona.
Okay, I'm not sure I could completely understand that, but
I moved to Arizona.
oh, you moved to Arizona.
Yes.
I see. Okay. But you had the property listed here, looks like all summer.
All summer, it just didn't sell. So I was trying to sell it for cash. So just wanted to know. I mean, I do have a contract with someone right now going. He's offering 195,000. So I know you're not gonna offer that much, but I just wanted to see how much you wanted to offer.
He offered 195,000.
Cash, yes.
Did he give you earnest money?
Well, he hasn't. He's telling because I'm actually negotiating the closing costs. He wants me to pay the closing cost. And I said, well, can we do half and half? So that he hasn't answered yet.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think if I remember right, when we initially talked, we were talking somewhere around 170.
Yes.
Of course, I want you to get as much for your house as possible, but at the same time, you know, I hope it's okay with you, but it's always my goal to try to leave people in a better place than I found them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And one of the things that you need to know is that the person that made you that offer, they don't have a plan to live in that house, do they?
No, they're not. No.
They're not. So the way it works with investors is that we work based on numbers, and the numbers are what the numbers are, right? So what I mean by that is that if you took your car to, CarMax, because remember, they'll buy your car even if you don't buy theirs, right? And you said, hey, listen, I'm moving out of the country. I just want to, sell my car. How much will you give me for it? If you took it to 3 different car dealerships, they're not all going to give you the same number, but the point is it's going to be close because they know instinctively what they can sell it for. They know they're going to have to run it through the shop and detail it and wax it up and shine the tires and all that nonsense. And they know that they're running a business and they have to make a profit. And based on that, they're going to make you an offer. And on an automobile, it'll probably be a matter of hundreds of dollars apart, not thousands of dollars apart. Does that make sense? So when it comes to houses, of course, all the investors aren't going to be at the same price either. But typically what you should find is they should be thousands of dollars apart, not tens of thousands of dollars apart. So it's awful nice that someone is talking to you about 195,000. But if I was going to bet lunch money, I would think that that's not going to close. Because the numbers are what the numbers are. And when they check with their partner and all that kind of stuff, they're going to have to come back and either say they need it for a lower price, or they're going to say they're not going to be able to move forward. So, and I only tell you that because I see you've already spent from May to September with no results. And I really don't want to see you have another 45 days and then we're having this conversation again. So, I mean, if you want to sell it, if you want to know that it's going to be sold and all that, that you might ask that person to bring you a stack of master statements from other houses that they've bought. Right? Because if they can't show you that, they probably haven't bought any houses. So if they haven't bought any houses, probably not going to buy yours either. Did you already sign that contract?
No, I have not.
I mean, do you think you could find a way to be miserably happy somewhere around 170?
70 is too low. I mean, at least, my loan is almost there, 170, I mean, like, I'm only not even making anything above it,
I see. Well, but remember now, at that number, of course, we're going to buy it as is, and we're going to close, we'll get you the money quickly. And of course, we'd pay all the closing costs. I'd be happy to steer you towards an attorney that'll take care of everything for you at a good rate because we refer a lot of business over there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me think about this because, I mean, if 195 is something I was hoping about, and if it doesn't work out, then I guess you're my next book.
Well, yeah, maybe, but, I mean, I think, maybe somewhere around 170 can, be okay now. If we're going to have this conversation again in a month when that doesn't close, it's not going to be 170 anymore. It's probably going to be 160.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I like to give the best offer I can up front because I want to do the best I can for you, up to the risk of, putting myself in danger. And sadly, for people that aren't going to live in a house, we're really getting into the toughest time of the year for me to buy properties because the weather starts getting colder, the kids are already back in school, and we're already at a point now where people aren't moving that want to move. People are moving because they have to move, and that really cuts down on the buyer pool on the back end. So I end up holding the property longer, paying more taxes and utilities and insurance. And there's a good likelihood that I might have to hold on to this thing till next spring.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is a tough call, but I guess I'll let you know by next week. Is that okay?
Say that again.
I'll let you know by next week. If that's okay.
You're going to let me know by next week?
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's okay. Here's the thing, right? Like, it's kind of embarrassing to say it like this, but I don't have unlimited money. Like you happen to call at a good time because we just had a couple things, close and, I'm flush with money for now, but, people are calling all the time. And if I end up, coming across an opportunity that, the seller and, and we can kind of find a price, I may not have the money to do it. You can check.
Maybe I might just have to rent back again because I didn't want to rent it because next year's gonna be even worse conditions. But I guess
How much did you have it rented for?
1,800 per month.
1,800? Yeah. And frankly, even at, around 170, that's not a number as a rental that would even make sense financially.
Yeah.
So, we would have to, think about, making an additional investment and, making the inside shine like a new penny with the thought of maybe reselling it later.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but thank you for calling. We'll see I know I understand your situation, but maybe we'll see that the destiny lies for me now. I tried selling it, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, no, I understand. Look, you always have to do that. You got to give it your best shot, but now, the whole summer went by and now we're here. I'll talk to Frank, we work together on these things. I don't know if he's got a little bucket of money that I don't know about, but, I don't know that he's really, I don't think, frankly, I'm not sure he wants to even go as high as 170 because that was a number we were talking about in the spring. Typically by the time we get to fall and winter, everything drops by about 10%. So, if you think, take a day and maybe call me back by Friday if you
Yeah,
think,
sure, I can do that.
because I want to try to get you as much as we can,
Oh, no, I agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
And you were, if I remember, didn't you, I talked to a lot of people, but I thought maybe you said that you were planning to do some upgrades. Did you go ahead and do those already?
I didn't do any of it. No, after that, I decided not to because it was just stuff.
If I gave you a blank check and said, spend whatever you think you need to spend to, do everything that you thought you wanted to do, how much do you think you would spend?
I would say about
How much?
10,000.
10,000?
Yep.
Wow. What, I mean, what would you do for 10,000? That's 10, in my world, 10,000 doesn't go any far. That's why I go into a comedy club and there's a 2-drink minimum. That's like a cover charge.
I had to pay basement. I would have. I did make not only upgrades, not upgrades, but I did all the fixing. The tenant laptop was in really bad condition, but I did to upgrade to get just everything, even the tank, everything that I had to replace in the house.
I see.
So like, I'm not gonna do any more of things.
No, no, of course. Let's do this. I'll talk to Frank. I'll give him a call tomorrow and see, what kind of mood he's in about all this. And you think long and hard about what sounds like a nice offer, but I mean, honestly, I don't see it making it to the finish line because those numbers aren't going to work for an investor. And then we'll circle back on Friday. How does that sound?
Okay. Yeah, that works.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I want to thank you again for, calling back and keeping in touch with us. I'm hoping
Thank you so much. Yeah.
hoping we can find a way to work together.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much for calling me.
Okay. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.